Hello Internet and welcome to this post Final Fantasy 15 playthrough review where I will be just covering up my thoughts on what I thought of Final Fantasy 15 overall as a game. I thought I'd do it this way because I felt this way I can just discuss my thoughts without having interruptions like cutscenes or anything. I can just, explain what kind of things I liked and disliked about the game. So first of all, there's a few things that I need to address beforehand. The sound quality overall from my playthrough wasn't the greatest. I'm fully aware of that. The reason is that when I got the game and waiting 10 years to actually finally play the game, I simply just put the game into the console and turned on the game, pressed share, and that's kind of it. I put no thoughts into checking the sound setup quality whatsoever. I just turned on the game and that's it. So I had this fairly cheap headset that I used for the microphone, and I didn't think of changing the settings so that the PlayStation's sound wasn't coming out of my TV and instead was coming through to my headphones. So what was happening was that when I did the whole stream, the sound was coming through live as you would normally do, the live feed, but then it was also picking up the microphone, at least was picking up the noise coming from the TV, so hence there is a slight echo, which I didn't realize was there until I had to rewatch my videos in order to edit the videos and upload them one by one to YouTube. So that was annoying. That is something that I will make sure won't happen again. The other thing I want to address is that even though it's now the year 2018 as of recording this video, I did finish Final Fantasy 15 in the year 2016, when it was released originally. This does mean that whatever I'm going to describe and discuss in this video will be based on when I originally played the game. So this does not include any of the DLC, such as the episode Gladio, etc. This does not any of the changes they made through the rest of the game, say with the chapter 13. So there's a bunch of things that I won't address because I didn't play it at the time. Okay, so I just want to point out these things before we go any further. So Final Fantasy 15. I think the best way I can describe my thoughts on this game overall is that it was alright. I've played a lot of Final Fantasy games throughout the years, and you could say I'm a Final Fantasy fan. So I do come in with a very opinionated idea of what a Final Fantasy game should be like. And this does mean that if certain things don't fit in that genre, I tend to dislike the game a bit further. So let's look at the things that I did like about Final Fantasy 15. We're gonna go over sort of a list, where I'll be discussing the things I did and didn't like. So right off the bat, one of the most impressive things of Final Fantasy 15 is just the world that they've created. Starting off in Lucis, going to Altissia, it's just a very beautiful, well-crafted world that they've made. It looks stunning, and there's no denying that. It's an absolutely beautiful place, especially when you start off in Lucis. You have this just humongous, large open world that has so much scenery to look at. It's stunning, and it goes from like volcanoes to ravines to seasides. There's a whole bunch of things that you will encounter whilst you travel through the countryside. There's a giant crater in the middle, these rocky cliffs, these rock sort of beams that span over over the zone. It looks very, very good. And I enjoyed traversing the area. What I didn't like was that they filled this entire area, especially Lucis, with pointless side missions. I think for me the side missions were one of the more annoying aspects of the game in general, and that's because they didn't lead to anything. It just felt unrewarding. you had, I believe his name was Taka in Hammerhead, who had you go back and forth, pretty much all over the place just to get a few items from enemies that you had to kill for him just to make a recipe. And then you got some random stuff from him as a reward. It didn't feel rewarding. The same applies to Dave, where he had to collect a whole bunch of dog tags. This whole mini side quest chain goes on way too long, and it just doesn't feel like it leads anywhere. It feels like there's no reward to it. Oh, you get a bunch of random items from him. Hey, here's an elixir. Well done. Like, okay, is that it? Did I just go all this way to the other side of the freaking continent just to collect a dog tag, just so that you can give me an elixir? I feel like there could have been sort of a better rewards, or have something that feels more rewarding. In the end, you're the hunter. I'm still not quite sure why I've been helping you for so long. In the beginning, sure, maybe, but throughout the entire first 9 chapters, I feel like that was way too long. Then you had characters like Sanya, who just, these missions didn't feel like they were going anywhere. It just felt more that they were a chore. And I think that's maybe the problem with the pacing of this game, is that's the game in the first 9 chapters just gives you too much to do. And the things that it gives you to do, in most cases, aren't really that rewarding, and they feel just pointless. At least that's how it felt like to me. I think the only side quests chain that I liked was Vives, because he kept giving you gil that I felt like I could use, as opposed to the random items that I didn't really feel like I had a use for, other than, maybe the cooking, or that's about it. Elemency maybe. Another aspect that I did like, which I know some people didn't like, and that was the battle system. I personally enjoyed it. However, I can see how it can get frustrating when I had certain fights. I was fighting, say, a random enemy, and then the Imperials decided to drop on top of you, and you had like 5, 6, 7, 8 guys just shooting at you, and you couldn't go anywhere. You're just standing there being attacked. I did change my control settings to, I believe it's called Type B. And what Type B did is that the dodge and attack button weren't on opposite sides of the PlayStation controller. So I think originally they were square and circle, or something along the lines. And it meant that I couldn't hold down dodge at the same time as trying to attack. So I did change to Type B, which I think was more akin to what the demo was like when the demo was added as part of Final Fantasy Type 0. So it felt more like that. And you can argue, well, you're just holding down dodge, you automatically dodge, it's not exciting. But to me, it was more fun to play that way. Because it was easier, I think, in the end, is the reason why I enjoyed it more. I could just hold down dodge. My character would dodge 9 out of 10 times, unless I was in an attacking animation, in which case I would get hit if the enemy hit me first. But it made it more fun, because I could just, dash around the place or warp around the place, do various attacks. My character would automatically dodge. I would jump into the air, do aerial combos. My character would dodge in the air as well, sidestep, I think, or air step, whatever it's called. And it just made it visually pleasing to me, and that is probably the biggest reason that I liked the battle system. It was visually pleasing, and I do think that they could make it more intricate, but visually it was exciting to me. However, what I didn't like was the magic. I couldn't figure it out in the game how to use the magic, and I cannot remember if I actually ever figured it out. The game at the beginning gives you like a whole bunch of tutorials that you could go through. I'm like, I'm not going to sit through these tutorials. That's not going to happen. That just seems absolutely pointless. Just let me go into the game, and if I need to know something in game, then let me do it. But no, you have 100 tutorials, however many there were. I might exaggerate just a little bit, but you have like 100 tutorials at the beginning that you could sit through, or you could go and start and play the game. It's the obvious choice. Of course I want to start and play the game. I don't want to sit through, I don't know, half an hour of tutorials just to figure out how certain things work. Just explain it to me in the game. And I don't think the game really ever told you how magic works. I was able to combine certain magic, but I wasn't able to figure out if there were spells like Ultima or Flare or things like Meltdown or, you know, those kind of spells. I felt like they were missing. The only I could get were things like lightning, fire, and ice, and then maybe some like poison or those kind of things. It didn't really feel like there was much magic. The little magic that was there, however, was pretty cool, because if you casted, or one of your characters casted a spell, you would get hit if you stood inside it as well, which is funny. I can see how it can be annoying, but it is funny, especially if you cast like a fire spell and you can see you're just being covered in coal, or basically you're black from soot or whatever it is. Same with if someone casts an ice spell, your character is, you know, covered in ice, which I thought was a neat touch, but I can imagine it's being frustrating. Another thing I didn't like about the combat system, and this only really affected you in Lucis, the first zone, and that is that sometimes you get random encounters, and I felt like this is weird in Final Fantasy 15 because all the enemies are on the world map. You know, you can see where enemies are walking, and if you're nearby and an enemy is hostile, you know, you get a red bar at the top of your screen. That's fine. But then you still have random encounters in the Imperials randomly dropping an airship on top of you with, like, I don't know, 10 Imperial soldiers in it. And that was frustrating because some fights, at least for me anyway, felt like they could go on for a long time. And then you have the Imperials come on top of that to, you know, spoil the party and make the fight even longer when it doesn't really need to. So I felt like that could be that I didn't like it in the demo, and I still didn't like it in the live game. So I felt that the game could do without that. It didn't really add anything to the game for me. It just frustrated me more than anything. Another thing I did like about the game is the voice acting. So the voice acting was pretty good. Normally speaking, I'm the kind of guy who, when he does play a Japanese game or a JRPG and there is voice acting, I tend to switch it to the Japanese voice acting. I don't know why. To me, it just feels more natural to have characters that, to me, generally look more Asian or anime to speak with a Japanese voice. It just makes more sense to me. I feel like if I watch an anime or anime cutscenes or Asian style kind of games, and I hear English voices, it just seems off. But I think Final Fantasy 15 did a fairly good job in not looking like very traditional Japanese. I think Final Fantasy in general does a good job at that. So the voice acting didn't feel out of place, and I actually quite liked the voice acting. Ardyn was probably the better voice acting, but of course, we know who is voice acting Ardyn, so it's, you know, not that surprising. But I think even the four main characters, I think the voice acting was pretty good. I enjoyed listening to the voices, and for the first time, it didn't feel like it was out of place to have English voices as opposed to Japanese voices. So I liked that as well. I thought that was a good aspect. Now here's the big dislike. The dislike that, for me, took a lot of points off in how I enjoyed the game. And that's the story. I just didn't like the story. I didn't think the story was that interesting. Most of the characters I didn't really care about. And for me to be able to enjoy a game, I need to be able to, you know, appreciate the characters. And in most cases, I didn't. And the story just felt lacking. I mean, in the first 9 chapters, you're in Lucis. And because the game gives you so much, you know, side stuff to do, it really feels like it just takes away from the story. Like all the side missions, the hunts, the extra things you could do. It just felt it took away from the game, but you had to do some of these missions because if you didn't, your character was too low level, so you couldn't start the next mission, or at least it would have a recommended level of, say, level 13 to start this story mission. And I felt like I need to at least be level 13, so I felt like I need to do these missions that aren't related to the story in order to get to level 13 in order to continue with the story. And I felt like it detracted, that there was just too much to do in Final Fantasy 15. To the point that by episode 9, which is where you would go to the next zone, I already had clocked 40 hours, which for an old school Final Fantasy fan, that is roughly the amount of time you'd spend in an entire game. And you could argue, well, you get more money for your buck. But I felt like it didn't add anything to the game. 40 hours in, say, for example, Final Fantasy 9 was 40 hours of story. There wasn't that much side content to do in Final Fantasy 9. There was a few things, but it wasn't that it was just completely overtaking the entire game, or at least the first half of the game. And that's what the side missions did in Final Fantasy 15 for me. The 40 hours I had in the first 9 chapters, that was mostly side missions and not actual story. There wasn't that much story to begin with, in my opinion. The other problem is that there's plot holes that are never explained in the story. And this alludes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video, where I didn't play the DLC episodes. When I finished the game, those things weren't there. So, where Ignis loses his eyesight, it's never explained in the entire game why and how and when he lost it. It's never explained. Or when Gladio leaves to do something, he never explains why he's leaving. At least he didn't in my playthrough. And when he came back, it was like, oh yeah, let's continue what we were doing, and there's nothing else. So where did you get the scars from? Never explained in the game. And I felt like those things should have been told in the game, and then I was made aware of the things that were added in the DLC, the episodes. I felt like I had to pay extra in order to see content and explanations of certain events that should have been in the game from the beginning. There is no reason why those things weren't in the main game. And I felt like that was just a bit cheap. Like, it's never explained why certain things happen. On top of that, who I didn't like either was Luna Freya. I just didn't care about her as a character. We're explained fairly early on in the game that the marriage between Noctis and Luna Freya is an arranged marriage, and they hadn't seen each other, in fact, for 10 years or so. So from the beginning, I was already like, okay, so they're getting married not because they want to, but because they kind of have to, as a sort of a symbol of a peace treaty, a symbol of we're everything is okay, we're not going to do anything, it's all good. And that kind of just took away some of my interest in Luna Freya, because from the beginning I was already like, well, they don't really know each other. They haven't seen each other for 10 years, so they were kids when they last saw each other. How do they know whether or not they love her? How do they know each other? And before you're going to say, well, they send a teleporting doggy or wolf pup, whatever, to bring around a diary in order for them to write in, and that's the interaction they have. I'm like, that's nothing. There's nothing there for me to say, oh yeah, that's great. I had fun in that. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed characters like Iris and characters like Aranea a lot more, because those are characters that brought something different. They brought something unique. They brought personality. They brought some character. Where I felt Luna Freya was lacking in all of that. I didn't feel like she had character, which to me is the biggest requirement in order to be an entertaining or an exciting character. And she brought nothing. And then, of course, the whole trial of Leviathan happens, And guess what? We get an Aerith situation. But now, all of a sudden, we're getting all these cutscenes involving Luna Freya. Like, suddenly we were supposed to care about her. I'm like, come on. Now I'm supposed to care about Luna Freya? Why? Why now? What has changed? They still haven't seen each other, apart from very briefly during a speech she made in public. And that's about it. Oh yeah, very briefly during the trial of Leviathan. Great. That's about the interaction we had. So we still don't know anything regarding their relationship in, have they changed? They still like each other? It's just like, okay. Didn't really care about Luna Freya. And the other thing, story-wise, that I thought was pretty bad was the pacing. So you start off in Lucis with just all this stuff to do. And I was like, okay, Lucis is cool, but I've spent 40 hours in Lucis. I'm kind of looking forward to go to the next place, Altissia. And when you arrive in Altissia, you think, oh my god, this looks absolutely insane. This is beautiful. And then you do like 3 story missions in Altissia, and then you're off. I'm like, I press the map button to look at the map of Altissia, and all I'm using is like a very tiny fraction of that map. What, 20% or so of that entire map of Altissia is what I'm using? Come on. There's no other areas I can go to in Altissia that provide anything. There's no content there, because when I walked into Altissia, when I sailed into Altissia, my first thoughts were, when I pressed the map button, am I going to spend another 40 hours in here doing all these side missions? And the reason I was wondering that is because Vive had given me a mission to go in Altissia and take a photo of like a painting, and I was like, so I'm going to get missions in Altissia now. But as far as I'm aware, and I might be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, he was the only character who gave me a mission in Altissia. I don't recall any other character giving me a mission, apart from take a photo of the wedding dress kind of mission, but that's about it. And I was out of Altissia, but in like a chapter. So all the way up until chapter 9, like, oh my god, Lucis, it's huge. Then you get onto the boat to go to Altissia, and then 1 or 2 chapters later, and you're off again, off to Niflheim. You think, well, hang on, how come? Where did this come from? Final Fantasy 13 had a huge problem with pacing. It's the first 10 chapters. People complained it was just a corridor, and I think some guy made a map of the first 3 chapters, and it was literally just walking forward. And then you get to chapter 11, where suddenly things become a bit more open. And Final Fantasy 15 does the opposite. The first 9 chapters are extremely open, and then it's just literally on a railroad track, on a track. You're literally on a train. It's not even the joke, oh, you're just on a train, like it was in Final Fantasy 13. You're literally on a train in Final Fantasy 15 for several chapters. I'm not even joking. It's, I think, from chapter 12 or from chapter 10 up until chapter 13, you're on a track. There's a few things that happen in between, but generally you're on a track until you get to Niflheim. You think, oh, well, okay, they took that critique very literally. So I think overall the pacing was really bad, with too much to do in the first chapter and the first 9 chapters, and then almost nothing to do side missions wise in the remaining chapters. It's all story missions from here on out. So I felt like the game could have done, or the developers could have done a better job at that. The last thing I want to discuss that I really liked, and that is the music. I'm a big fan of the original, or the old school Final Fantasy soundtracks, with Final Fantasy 9 being one of my favorites. You know, there's things like Final Fantasy 7. There's many great Final Fantasy soundtracks. And it was really cool that you can actually buy sort of a CD in game with the soundtracks of each Final Fantasy game. I thought that was pretty cool. Of course, it didn't have every song on it, but it had sort of the more popular songs. And I thought that was a really cool feature. And I was really looking forward to whenever I reached a new station, petrol station, that I could see if they had a new CD, and I was looking for certain CDs. I wanted Final Fantasy 6 and 7, and I wanted Final Fantasy 9. So I was really looking forward to whenever I reached a new area, like, oh, let's see what Final Fantasy CD they have over here. This is going to be awesome. So I thought that was a cool feature, and for the first few chapters, I didn't pay much attention to the music. There were a few songs that stood out, but it wasn't until the battle theme changed into a second battle theme where I really started noticing the music. And this is usually a thing for me anyway. Some songs catch my eye, or my ear I should say, but I think overall the music is there and I appreciate the songs, but it will usually require a specific song to really catch my eye, so I can say, this is a song that I really like, and then I start paying attention to the music. And it was the second battle theme in Final Fantasy 15 where I realized, oh, actually, I should pay attention to the music, because this song is really, really cool. And then I start paying attention to the music more and more and more. Not the soundtracks you can put into your car, but the action music, the battle themes, the various songs you hear when you go to various places. Lestalem, for example, Hammerheads. When you get to Atisia, the music in general. And I really like the music. I thought they did a good job. All the way up until the credits. When you hear Florence and the Machine and their Stand By Me cover. Unfortunately, it gets copyright claimed on YouTube. But it's a great cover, and I was really pleased and surprised actually that they picked Florence and the Machine of all things. I wasn't expecting just a Western band to to have a song play in the credits in a Final Fantasy game. I don't recall that ever happened. So I think the music in general was really good. It was a strong part of the game. My overall thoughts on Final Fantasy 15 is, I think the game is alright. It's not a bad game. It's not a great game. I wouldn't put it in my list of favorite Final Fantasy games. I had some good moments with it. The key aspects, the story, was lacking in my opinion. I do think they could have done a better job, especially after 10 years. I know it went through various changes, and that clearly has affected the game, but I do think that the game has some good things going for it. And now, of course, you have the Royal Edition, and the Royal Edition has all these things that I didn't have when I originally played the game. So I might have to consider whether or not I should replay the game at some point, just to experience the game with all the extra content that, in my opinion, should have been in the game but wasn't, just to see if my opinion on Final Fantasy 15 has changed. I expect that I might like the game a bit more, because there's more story in the game, and it explains the things I critiqued the story about earlier. So I think overall, Final Fantasy 15 is okay as a game. It's sort of in the middle, I would say. Certainly has some good aspects for it. I think personally the story is what took quite a few points off, and the characters. So I think overall some characters were just not very exciting. I didn't like Gladio, for example. I thought Gladio was, as a character, I think he's okay, but we've seen the big muscly man swinging a giant massive claymore around and just being kick-ass. We've seen that before in other games, and I think in other games they've done it better. For example, I would say that Gladio serves a similar role to Auron in Final Fantasy X, and I think he's just not nearly as cool as Auron in Final Fantasy X. I did like Prompto, however, and I know that not everyone does, but I like Prompto because, to me, Prompto felt he represents what the typical Final Fantasy fan is. Being excited about chocobos, singing the victory fanfare, those kind of things. I felt like he was a representative of us. coming with the jokes, the memes, haha, lols, and to me it felt like the director, the developers designed Prompto to be a representation of what we're like as Final Fantasy fans. I could be entirely wrong, but that's what Prompto felt like to me. And Ignis, I don't know, I didn't really care about Ignis. And Noctis, I felt like he was a bit too mopey, a bit too negative. It's always like, ugh, fine, or ugh, I don't like vegetables, and I don't want to get up early, blah blah blah. It just, I don't know. I had flashbacks to Squall in Final Fantasy VIII in the first, I don't know how many hours, where he was this stroppy teenager or whatever it was. You know, and he's always like, I don't care, you know, go talk to a wall, blah blah blah. So I had those kind of flashbacks. And yeah, so I wasn't too keen on Noctis. As a matter, I just like the side characters. You know, Iris, Aranea. I like those characters more because, you know, those seem more fun. Anyway, that's my my post Final Fantasy 15 playthrough recap, whatever you want to call it. So if you're looking into getting Final Fantasy 15, especially with the Royal Edition out now, I would say, yeah, go for it. Personally, I thought it was okay as a game, but you might enjoy it a lot more than I did, and that's because I was just very critical. I'm used to Final Fantasy games being in a certain way, and this kind of steered off from that. So of course, there's problems with this story, which I've talked about a few times already, and that for me was really the biggest dislike, the negative that I found about this game. If those character-specific DLCs were part of the main game, which in my opinion it should have been, then I probably would have rated this game better than the alright I'm giving it at the moment. It might even be considered a good game. So yeah, unfortunately I didn't get to play those things. I might get around to playing them at some point, but yeah, for the time I judged the game based on what I played. And yeah, speaking of pacing, another thing I really disliked about Final Fantasy, another thing that was really annoying actually, was Chapter 13 in general. And I know this is not even something people aren't surprised about, because when I was playing through the game, playing through Chapter 13, and I looked online to see what other people were thinking with regards to Final Fantasy, with regards to Chapter 13, and I saw all the complaints about Chapter 13, I realized it's not just me. Chapter 13 is really poorly designed. I don't know who thought it was a great idea. Again, flashbacks to Final Fantasy VIII, where you get to the final dungeon and the game is like, ha ha, I'm removing all your shit and you're getting nothing. And this is what they did in Final Fantasy 15. They took everything away, your party members even, your weapons that I spent quite some time in collecting, and they gave me some shitty ring. And then I had to play some corridor crawler game where it tried to be some sort of mixture between Metal Gear Solid with the freaking key cards and hiding behind the things, as well as some cheap Resident Evil jump scare kind of game where zombies are lying on the floor and suddenly attack you, even though you could see that they were going to attack you. So yeah, I felt Chapter 13, the game could have done without that. I did not expect to play some hybrid Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil combination, and when I did, I didn't like it. It was just horrible. It was slow. That weapon, the ring, that's supposedly now a lot more powerful, was really weak at the time, and it just made things really frustrating. And it was at that point I felt like, if this is going to take a lot longer, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to finish the game. But they've addressed that, and this character DLC added, so to me that would seem the game is a lot better now than it was when it was released back in 2016. So if you're looking into getting the game, feel free to look for a copy, and if you do, go for the Royal Edition, which is now also released on PC. Anyway, that's the end of my recap, and I will see you guys until the next one.